Welcome to HFY Galaxies, where we explore the untold stories of humanity's rise in a galaxy that once sought to suppress it. Our journey begins with a humble species, cast aside by the most powerful civilizations in the universe. But what happens when you push humanity to the edge? They adapt, they overcome, and they thrive. Join us as we uncover the secrets of humanity's hidden empire, one built not on force, but on resilience, innovation, and the unyielding will to survive. The starship Titan floated effortlessly through the dark expanse of space, its sleek form cutting through the void as it orbited Earth. Commander Raoul Montgomery stood at the front of the bridge, his posture straight and unyielding, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. The soft hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the command center, a constant reminder of the immense power propelling them toward an unknown future. The vast, unbroken stretch of space outside the viewport seemed infinite, but all Raoul could focus on was the approaching star station of the Galactic Union. It grew larger with every passing second, its massive structure gleaming like a jewel, reflecting the distant light of stars. The station was an otherworldly sight. Its surface was smooth and shining, reflecting the cosmos in a way that felt almost unnatural. It was a monument to alien civilization, the very embodiment of everything humanity had longed for. For years, humanity had scanned the stars, dreaming of this moment, the moment when Earth would finally be accepted into the galactic community. The Titan and its crew were about to make history. Lieutenant Harper Holt broke the silence of the bridge. His voice was calm, but there was a slight edge of anticipation in it. "Commander, we're receiving final docking instructions. All systems are green. We're clear to approach." Raoul felt his pulse quicken as he nodded, his gaze still fixed on the massive station. He could sense the weight of this moment pressing on him. He was not just a leader on this mission, he was carrying the hopes of an entire planet. Humanity had waited for this day for centuries, and now, it was finally here. But with that anticipation came a lingering unease. The unknown stretched before them, like a door they were about to open. What awaited them on the other side? "Understood, Lieutenant," Raoul said, his voice steady but heavy with responsibility. "Take us in." Slowly. As the Titan maneuvered toward the docking bay, Raoul couldn't help but feel a strange sense of awe. The docking bay was like nothing he had ever seen. Ships of every shape and form filled the space. Some appeared crystalline, their surfaces reflecting the starlight in dazzling arrays. Others were more organic, resembling living, shifting masses suspended in shimmering energy fields. Some ships were so strange that Raoul found it difficult to even comprehend their structure. They pulsed with life, as though they existed in a state of constant flux. "Look at them," said Dr. Olivia Roses, the chief scientist on the mission, stepping beside Raoul as she too took in the alien ships. Her voice was a mix of awe and wonder. "These ships, they're beyond anything we could imagine. I've never seen anything like this." Raoul's eyes lingered on the strange vessels. They were beautiful in their own way, but they also felt unsettling. Each ship seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't quite grasp, like they were alive in a way that humanity's creations could never be. It was a stark reminder that they were stepping into a world far beyond anything they had ever known. The excitement in his chest gave way to a slow, creeping unease. "Yes," Raoul murmured, his voice low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "We've come so far, but this is just the beginning. We have no idea what we're walking into." The Titan glided smoothly into the docking bay, its sleek exterior glowing softly in the station's artificial light. The bay was enormous, its walls lined with technology so advanced that Raoul could barely begin to comprehend it. The Titan settled into place with a soft, almost imperceptible thud, the docking clamps engaging securely around the hull. For a moment, all was quiet. The crews stood still, staring at the view outside, lost in the magnitude of what they were about to do. Raoul turned slowly to face his team, his gaze sweeping over each member. Their expressions were a mixture of excitement, uncertainty, and pride. They had all trained for this day, studied alien customs, languages, and history. They were ready. Or at least, they thought they were. Raoul's voice broke the silence, strong and commanding. This is it. Our first step onto the galactic stage. We're about to meet them, the species that have watched us for so long. We will make a good first impression. Remember, we represent all of humanity today. As they walked toward the airlock, Raoul couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The station, with its quiet elegance, felt distant. Too perfect. It was as if it were watching them, observing their every move, weighing them, judging them. His steps slowed as he approached the airlock, the weight of his thoughts slowing his pace. He pushed the thought aside. This was their moment. There was no room for doubt. The door slid open, and they stepped into the unknown. The alien station stretched before them, a maze of gleaming corridors and strange, shifting designs. They were greeted by beings from dozens of different species, tall crystalline figures, floating gaseous entities, and insectoid creatures with intricate exoskeletons. They all watched silently as the human delegation walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The Chrysal representative, a towering figure made entirely of diamond-like crystals, stepped forward. Its voice, like the sound of tinkling glass, echoed through the hall. You will follow us to the council chamber? Raoul felt a sudden chill in the air as the Chrysal's words hung in the space between them. There was no warmth, no welcoming gesture. Just cold authority. The group moved forward, guided by the alien beings. Raoul's eyes darted from one alien face to the next, each more strange than the last. They were walking through a world far beyond their understanding, a world where the rules of Earth didn't apply. But they were there to make a mark, to prove that humanity had a place in this vast, ancient universe. Yet as they moved deeper into the heart of the station, Raoul couldn't shake the feeling that the welcoming they had dreamed of was slipping through their fingers. Whatever awaited them in the council chamber would change everything. And humanity was not ready for what it would find there. The air felt different as the humans crossed the threshold of the massive docking bay aboard the Galactic Union's space station. It was as though the very atmosphere had shifted, charged with an energy that they couldn't quite understand. The vast expanse of the bay stretched before them, an awe-inspiring sight, but it was also overwhelming in its alien nature. Ships of all shapes and sizes hovered silently in the bay, some shimmering like crystalline structures, catching the faint light of distant stars, while others appeared to be amorphous, shifting and swirling, like clouds of gas suspended in space. There were even ships that resembled vast moving colonies, their surfaces teeming with what seemed like microscopic life forms, all of them silently floating in perfect synchrony. Dr. Olivia Roses, the chief scientist, stepped forward, her eyes wide with astonishment as she took in the sight before her. She whispered to herself, though the words carried in the quiet of the bay. These must be the three species we were briefed about: the Chrysal, the Varith, and the Azalori. The names hung in the air, strange and alien. She had read about these species, studied them, prepared for their encounter. Yet standing before them now, seeing the ships in person, the reality was far more staggering than anything she had imagined. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, like the station itself was watching them, evaluating them in ways they couldn't comprehend. As the humans moved deeper into the docking area, they were led by a group of Chrysal, their towering, crystalline forms shimmering in the dim light. These beings were made entirely of what appeared to be solidified light, each movement they made sending ripples across their diamond-like bodies. Their sharp, angular edges caught the light in strange, mesmerizing patterns, but there was nothing welcoming about their appearance. One of them, the Chrysal representative, stepped forward. It was taller than any human, its body radiant but cold, like a walking diamond. Its glowing eyes, faceless and void, locked onto Raoul. The gaze pierced him, not with warmth, but with an almost clinical detachment. There was no sign of friendliness, no gestures of welcome. Only a stern, silent command. "You will follow us to the council chamber," the Chrysal representative said, its voice clear but chilling. The words echoed, sharp as glass. No pleasantries. No questions. The humans stood frozen for a moment. The abruptness of the statement left them uneasy. They had prepared for this moment for months, studying every detail of the cultures and customs they would encounter, but this was not the welcome they had imagined. There was no sense of diplomacy, no mutual understanding, only a cold command. As they were ushered forward, the humans felt the weight of the eyes that followed the Malian eyes from across the room. The bay was filled with beings from dozens of different species, their forms more bizarre than anything humanity had ever dreamed up. There were creatures that seemed to melt into the shadows, while others looked almost like living sculptures, their bodies glowing with an unnatural light. Some had too many eyes, others had none at all, their faces as smooth as glass. The variety was overwhelming, and yet, every single being's gaze felt the same, judgmental, calculating. There was no warmth in the air, only the sense that these beings were scrutinizing every movement the humans made. Raoul glanced at his team. He could feel the tension rising within him, and he knew his crew felt it too. They had walked into the unknown, ready for peace, for recognition, and instead, they were treated like intruders. His heart thudded heavily in his chest, and a small, uneasy thought crept into his mind. Was this how they saw humanity? As the group moved forward, the grand hall loomed ahead, its high ceilings stretching far above them, filled with rows of seats, each occupied by different species. Some beings were floating in mid-air, suspended by no visible means, while others stood firmly on the ground, their movements eerily precise and controlled. The Exiled, one of the species they had read about, resembled insect-like creatures, their segmented bodies shifting in a way that made them appear to pulse with life. Their many eyes blinked in unison, studying the humans with an intensity that was both unsettling and deeply alien. As they entered the council chamber, Raul's sense of unease grew. The chamber itself was imposing, massive, circular, and filled with an air of authority that seemed to radiate from the walls. The Varith representative, a swirling mass of gaseous form, hovered at the center, its ethereal body casting a soft glow across the room. Its presence seemed to absorb the very light around it, giving it a sense of being both everywhere and nowhere at once. The council chamber felt like a courtroom, with the humans standing in the center of the room, surrounded by dozens of species observing them silently. The seats that lined the walls were not for comfort, they were cold, imposing, like elevated thrones. The representatives of the council species sat silently, watching the humans with piercing eyes. It was as though they were being judged, weighed in a way they had never experienced before. Raoul stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel his team's nervous energy radiating around him, but he knew they couldn't show it. They had come here to represent all of humanity, to show their peaceful intentions. But here, in this grand hall, it seemed as though their intentions didn't matter. The cold gaze of the council was unyielding. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating almost, as the Chrysal representative stepped forward once more. Its body shimmered as it moved, reflecting the light in sharp, fragmented patterns. Raoul felt the weight of its presence, a strange chill running down his spine. There was something deeply unsettling about the way the Chrysal looked at them as if they were an experiment, a curiosity to be examined, not a species worthy of respect. The moment hung in the air, and Raoul knew then whatever they had hoped for, this wasn't going to be a simple introduction. They were no longer the hopeful explorers of an unknown galaxy. They were on trial. And in this trial, humanity's place in the galaxy would be decided not by their achievements or goodwill, but by a council that viewed them through a lens of suspicion and fear. The judgment was about to begin, and there was no turning back. The humans stood motionless in the center of the council chamber, their eyes darting from one alien face to the next. The atmosphere was thick, heavy with a kind of oppressive stillness, as though the very walls of the room were pressing in around them. Representatives from the three most powerful species in the galaxy sat in their seats, their presence both formidable and cold. The Chrysal, towering and crystalline, seemed to shimmer with an almost imperceptible hum, while the Azilorid, insectoid in nature, perched silently, their many eyes gleaming with unspoken judgment. The Varith, a gaseous entity suspended within a glowing sphere, remained quiet, its swirling form shifting in patterns that seemed to reflect an intelligence far beyond anything the humans had ever encountered. Raoul felt a sense of vertigo as he gazed at the representatives, his chest tightening with a mix of anxiety and resolve. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The moment when they would either join the galaxy or be cast aside, locked in a corner of the universe with no way to reach the stars. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of humanity's hopes pressing down on him like an invisible force. The silence in the room grew unbearable, and Varith, the gaseous representative, finally spoke. Its voice was not a sound, but a vibration that seemed to echo directly in their minds. "We have studied your transmissions, your history, your biology. The Council has reached a unanimous decision." Raul's stomach twisted as the words sank in. He exchanged a brief glance with Dr. Rose's, whose face was pale but composed. She, too, could feel the gravity of the moment, the suffocating weight of the Council's gaze upon them. The Varith representative continued, its voice colder now, sharper, as though each word was a calculated blow. "Humanity is too unstable, too adaptable. You evolve too quickly. You adapt too easily. You do not follow patterns, you create chaos." The accusation was like a slap in the face, each word more damning than the last. Raul's chest tightened with disbelief. How could they say that? How could they view the very essence of humanity, its ability to change, to overcome challenges, as something dangerous? Wasn't adaptability the key to survival? Dr. Roses stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "Our adaptability is our greatest strength. It has allowed us to survive and evolve where others might have perished. We adapt to our environment, we solve problems, we innovate. Isn't that what you want to see?" But her words fell on deaf ears. The Chrysal representative rose next, its towering figure catching the light in harsh angles, the reflective surface of its body glistening like ice. Its voice, though clear and calm, carried a chilling finality. "You are forbidden from expanding beyond your solar system. Earth is now quarantined. Sentinel platforms will be positioned at the edges of your system. Any attempt to pass them will result in immediate destruction." The words hit like a physical blow. The humans stood in stunned silence as the weight of the Council's decision sank in. Quarantined. Cut off from the galaxy. Forbidden from exploring. Raul's blood ran cold. His thoughts raced, but they felt too heavy, too tangled to make sense of. Dr. Roses stepped back, her face paling as she looked at the other members of the delegation. There was no room for argument, no room for diplomacy. The decision had already been made, and it was final. Anger bubbled up inside Raoul. a wave that threatened to break through the calm exterior he had so carefully maintained. This was not just a decision about a few ships or a few humans. This was about the very essence of humanity's existence in the universe. How could they be judged so harshly, for simply surviving, for doing what any species would do in the face of adversity? Is this how it is? Rawls' voice was low, but firm. You reject us because we're too different, too unpredictable? You're afraid of what we might become. The Chrysal representative gave no answer, but the stillness in the room spoke volumes. The Varith, however, responded, its form shifting slightly as though it were reflecting on Rawls' words. We are not afraid of what you might become, it said, its tone dripping with disdain. We are protecting the galaxy from the chaos that comes with evolution unchecked. The universe cannot afford another species like you. Rawls' hands clenched into fists at his sides. He fought to keep his voice steady, but it quivered with frustration. We have every right to explore, to expand. This is our home, and we will not be locked away like animals in a cage. The chamber grew heavy with the weight of the council's verdict, the finality of their decision. As the representatives of the Chrysal, Varith, and Azalori remained silent, the humans were left to absorb the full force of the words that had just been spoken. They were condemned. Cut off from the galaxy. Isolated in a way that no one could have imagined. Dr. Roses finally spoke, her voice quiet but filled with a mixture of disbelief and resolve. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. But Raoul knew it wasn't that simple. The council had issued their decree, and there was no turning back. The humans were forbidden from expanding beyond their solar system. Their future was sealed. Or so the council thought. As the Varith representative turned away, Rawls' gaze hardened. The fight was far from over. He might not know how they would do it yet, but he would find a way. He would find a way to prove that humanity belonged among the stars, no matter the cost. And the first step would be getting back to Earth. To prepare. To fight. The council had made a mistake, and humanity would show them just how wrong they were. The hum of the Starship Titan seemed louder now, more oppressive, as it slowly turned away from the grand, alien Galactic Union station. The station, once a symbol of humanity's hopes and dreams, now appeared distant and cold, fading into the endless black of space behind them. Commander Raoul Montgomery stood alone by the observation window, his face pale, eyes fixed on the shrinking station as it became just another flickering light in the vast darkness. His fists were clenched at his sides, though his shoulders sagged with the weight of the rejection. The weight of what had just transpired, the sting of their isolation, seemed to press down on his chest, making it harder to breathe. He had prepared for this moment for so long. Every briefing, every analysis, every diplomatic move had been carefully calculated for success, but now, nothing. Everything they had worked for had come crashing down in an instant, and all that was left was the emptiness of space and the cold silence of the void. Dr. Olivia Roses entered the observation deck, her face just as grave as his. She had been the one to argue, to fight for humanity's place in the galaxy, and yet, here they were cast out, abandoned in the vastness of the universe. Her eyes, usually sharp with insight, now seemed clouded, her shoulders heavy with the same burden Raoul felt. They are afraid of us, Dr. Roses said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Not because of what we've done, but because of what we might become. Rawls' eyes flickered to her, his expression hardening. He had heard the council's words, the accusations that humanity was a threat because they evolved too quickly, adapted too easily. They feared humanity's potential, their unpredictability, the very things that made them strong. But in the council's eyes, it made them dangerous, chaotic. a wild card in a galaxy that thrived on stability and control. Raoul turned away from the window, his eyes filled with defiance and a raw determination. He couldn't accept this. He couldn't stand by and let humanity be silenced, shut out, relegated to isolation because of fear. "We won't accept this," he said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. His words rang through the quiet room like a challenge thrown into the vast expanse of space. "We need to get this back to Earth immediately. The world needs to know what we're up against." Dr. Roses nodded silently, her lips pressing together into a thin line. She didn't speak, but her eyes showed a shared resolve. They had been sent on a mission of peace, to represent Earth, to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Instead, they were sent home with nothing but rejection. But they had to make sure Earth knew the truth. They couldn't let their world go on blind to the true dangers, to the fear that the galaxy's oldest civilizations held for humanity. Raoul turned to the control panel, his fingers hovering over the keys. The crew, still reeling from the verdict, was quiet. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound filling the room. He could feel their eyes on him now, watching, waiting. They were his crew, his responsibility. He had to lead them, even through this moment of defeat. There could be no hesitation. "The Council may have cast us aside," Raoul said, his voice growing stronger, "but we will show them just how wrong they are. We will make sure humanity knows exactly what's at stake." The hum of the ship seemed to grow louder as the Titan began its journey back toward Earth. The cold, indifferent beauty of the station behind them faded into the distance, swallowed by the dark expanse of space. Yet, Raoul could feel something stirring within him, a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't the end. No, it was only the beginning. Humanity's future would not be defined by the Council's rejection. It would be shaped by their resilience, their strength, and their unwavering determination to rise above the impossible. As the ship moved further into the void, the stars seemed to blink at him from all directions, a reminder of the vastness of space. And for the first time, Raoul felt that, despite everything, they were not alone. The galaxy was vast, yes, but it was also full of untapped potential that humanity would now need to tap into. They would survive this. They would adapt. And one day, they would return. This was just the first step. They were not alone in their fight. Not anymore. Weeks had passed since the verdict, and Earth was no longer the same. The streets of every major city had become battlegrounds of uncertainty and fear. The news was everywhere, on every screen, in every corner of every home. The Galactic Union's decision to isolate humanity from the rest of the galaxy had set off a wave of chaos. Protests broke out like wildfire, each city teeming with angry crowds, their voices loud, their faces twisted with frustration and confusion. Some shouted for action, others for answers. The planet seemed to be on the edge, teetering between hope and despair. In the midst of this storm, military forces were on high alert. Soldiers, once accustomed to peacetime, now patrolled streets and government buildings, their eyes wary, ready for anything. Humanity's future hung in the balance, a fragile thread in a vast, indifferent universe. The world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move, the next piece of bad news, unsure of what would come next. Would they fight? Would they fall silent? Would Earth, the cradle of humankind, stand tall or cower under the weight of its fate? But amidst the chaos, there was one voice that stood steady, calm, and unwavering: Admiral Lydia Hart, a woman who had seen wars, battles, and countless conflicts. Her experience ran deep, a strategist who had lived through the darkest times, always finding a way to fight, to survive. She stood now in the war room at United Nations Space Command, her sharp gaze focused on the holographic display of Earth's current situation. The image before her flickered with data protest zones, military checkpoints, and simulations of possible enemy movements. Despite the turmoil outside, Admiral Hart was calm, a quiet strength emanating from her every gesture. Her fingers brushed over the display, a subtle motion, as though touching the pulse of the world. She had already seen the cracks, the flaws in the Council's judgment. They had cast humanity aside, thinking it would break under pressure. But Hart knew something the Council did not. She had spent years studying humanity's greatest strength, its resilience. "They think they've trapped us," Hart said, her voice low but filled with undeniable certainty. "They think we'll cower. But they've made a grave mistake. Humanity is at its best when pushed into a corner." Her words hung in the air, sharp and clear. She turned to face her officers, who stood in a quiet line before her, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. They were not soldiers of war, they were diplomats, peacekeepers, and strategists. But now, they were to be part of something bigger, a plan that would shape humanity's future, one where survival would be defined not by the limits imposed upon them, but by their ability to fight back in ways the Council had never imagined. "We'll go through the back door," Hart continued, her voice steady, filled with an energy that ignited something in each of her crew members. She wasn't asking for their trust, she was demanding it. This wasn't about revenge, it was about something more fundamental: survival, innovation, and humanity's right to exist beyond the walls the Council had built around them. The plan was simple, yet profound in its complexity. Humanity would build an empire in secret, carving out a space for themselves in regions the Galactic Union deemed worthless, areas where they had no interest. These were places far from the Council's watchful eyes, regions where nothing of value could grow, as far as the Council was concerned. But they were wrong. Admiral Hart knew it. The Council had misjudged humanity in the most fundamental way. They had thought that isolation would crush their spirit. Instead, it would be the very thing that ignited their creativity, their drive to build, to adapt, to survive. The plan wasn't just about survival, it was about defiance, about proving to the galaxy that humanity could thrive where no one thought it could. Hart believed that if they could make the most of these ignored regions, moons, asteroid belts, and dead zones of space, humanity could become stronger, more innovative, and more capable than anyone could ever expect. "While they ignore us, we will grow," she said, turning to her officers, each of them absorbing her words like a spark in the dark. "We'll develop technologies they can't imagine. We'll turn these barren worlds into something new, something no one has seen before. We will thrive where they think we cannot." The plan called for secrecy. They would build colonies hidden in the shadows of the galaxy, undetected by the Council's surveillance systems. They would develop new technologies, more efficient ways of surviving in the harshest environments. And when the time was right, they would strike. Not with brute force, but with a quiet, unstoppable march of progress and innovation. Humanity was about to rewrite the rules of survival. The Galactic Union thought they had isolated Earth, but in truth, they had given humanity a gift, a chance to grow in the places where others had written them off. And Admiral Hart knew that this was just the beginning. The Council had made their mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and thrive when pushed to the brink. As the room filled with a soft murmur of conversation and planning, Hart looked out the window, her gaze fixed on the earth below. The world was in chaos, but in her heart, she felt something else: determination. The road ahead would be difficult, but humanity had always been at its best when faced with the impossible. And this time, they would show the galaxy just how wrong the Council had been. "They think they've trapped us," Hart whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But they haven't seen what we're capable of. The universe would soon learn the true strength of humanity. And it would be nothing like the Council had ever expected. The cold, infinite expanse of space stretched out before humanity, yet in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, far from the prying eyes of the Galactic Union, humanity was quietly carving out its place among the stars. On Europa 9, a frozen moon circling a distant gas giant, a thriving human colony stood resilient against the harshest environment imaginable. The landscape, once a barren wasteland of ice and frozen rock, now buzzed with the hum of life. The ice, which had once held no promise, had been transformed. Beneath the thick, glacial surface, humans had found not only shelter but potential, a place to build, to survive, to grow. Inside the colony, structures of steel and glass rose up from the icy ground, their shimmering surfaces reflecting the artificial lights that had been designed to simulate warmth. Echo Base 1 had become a beacon of human ingenuity. It was more than just a place to live, it was a testament to human persistence. The low hum of machinery echoed in the cavernous structures, but it was a sound of life, a sound of creation. Kate Miller, a lead engineer, stepped out into the colony's central dome, her breath fogging the transparent glass above her. The cold air bit at her face, but inside the dome, the temperature was controlled, a warm contrast to the frozen world outside. She had seen the transformation of this place, from lifeless ice to a hub of activity. Now, as she stood looking out at the expanse of the moon, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. "This is only the beginning," she murmured to herself. Behind her, workers moved busily, some tending to the hydroponic gardens that flourished under carefully controlled conditions, others calibrating advanced energy systems. It was a delicate balance, creating life in the most hostile environment humanity could find, but it was working. The technologies they had developed, from energy-efficient heating systems to innovative water filtration, had turned Europa 9 into a thriving settlement. On the nearby planet of Helios, a world bathed in constant radiation from a dying star, humanity had made another home. The surface of Helios was a molten, radiation-filled hellscape, where the air itself burned and the ground radiated enough heat to melt metal. Yet, in this scorched world, human engineers had found a way to survive. Beneath the planet's surface, deep in protective bunkers, the first human research facility was taking shape. The colony here was smaller, but no less significant. Dr. William Oakes worked tirelessly, studying the effects of radiation on human biology. In the heart of his underground laboratory, he had made a breakthrough, a way to adapt human cells to survive the radiation. Dr. Oakes adjusted his glasses as he peered through the microscope. His hands trembled with excitement as he reviewed the data. The latest blood samples from a team of volunteers showed promising results. The human body, once so fragile in the face of radiation, had begun to adapt. Red blood cells, once unable to survive in such extreme conditions, had mutated, becoming stronger, more resilient. Dr. Oakes's hands trembled with excitement as he made his notes. They were no longer just surviving in a hostile environment, they were thriving, evolving. Above ground, construction teams were busy mining the rich thorium deposits hidden beneath the planet's surface. These materials were the key to powering not just Helios, but the colonies that stretched across the galaxy. Human innovation had turned a place deemed uninhabitable by the Galactic Union into a vital part of their growing empire. The resource-rich world of Helios would fuel humanity's expansion into even more distant, more dangerous regions of space. And the Council, in its ignorance, had no idea what humanity was capable of. The colonies on Europa 9 and Helios were just the beginning. Across the galaxy, hidden in the dark corners where the Galactic Union had chosen to ignore, humanity had begun to flourish. They had no allies, no supporters, but they had something far more powerful: adaptability. Where others saw only impossible worlds, humanity saw opportunity. In secret, more colonies were being established on worlds long forgotten by the Council. On Titanese, a gas giant, humans had built floating research stations that studied the planet's extreme weather patterns. On Oberon, a dark moon orbiting a dead star, underground cities were being carved out of solid rock, providing sanctuary for humanity's most critical research teams. Each new colony was a step towards something greater, a web of human presence that spanned the darkest corners of the galaxy. While the Galactic Union thought that isolating humanity would break them, they had overlooked one key thing: humans were not just survivors. They were creators. They had turned every corner of the galaxy that was deemed too harsh, too hostile, into a beacon of growth, a symbol of ingenuity. In the depths of space, far from the Council's reach, humanity was creating a future they could call their own. No longer would they be confined to a single planet, held back by the restrictions of the Council. They had found new worlds, new ways of life, and they were ready to fight for their place in the universe. While the Council believed humanity to be confined, humans were silently expanding, building a network of secret colonies, each one contributing to the strength of their growing empire. This empire would be built not on force, but on adaptation and ingenuity. The cold, forgotten corners of space had become the perfect playground for humanity's dreams. And as each colony thrived, so did their resolve. The Council had made a grave mistake in thinking that isolation would break humanity's spirit. Instead, it had given them the space to grow, to adapt, and to rise. The galaxy was about to witness the birth of something they could never have foreseen: the hidden empire of humanity. In the dark stretches of the galaxy, the true power of humanity was unfolding quietly, steadily, and with a purpose that none could yet understand. The horizon drifted silently through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it moved farther from the known reaches of the galaxy. Ahead, the lonely planet loomed like a forgotten relic, an isolated rock at the very edge of map space. Its surface was a harsh combination of jagged mountains and deep, endless valleys, barely touched by the faint light of distant stars. Nothing here had ever been deemed important, at least not by the Galactic Union. But to Captain Kai Westbrook, this desolate world held the promise of something unimaginable. The planet was an enigma. Despite its apparent emptiness, there was a strange sense of history woven into the land, something ancient, something lost. It wasn't visible at first, just a bleak stretch of barren rock and dust, but to Westbrook and his team, it was as if the very soil whispered secrets. His pulse quickened with every passing moment as the ship descended toward the surface, the planet's desolation both a curse and an invitation. As the horizon touched down, the planet's dust swirled up in muted clouds around the landing gear. The air was thin, almost suffocating in its stillness, but it was here, on this forgotten world, that Captain Westbrook had felt an inexplicable pull. He and his team had scoured the star maps for months, following faint signals that led them to this very place. Something ancient was buried here, something the galaxy had forgotten. They stepped outside, their boots crunching softly against the cold, dry ground. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, casting an eerie, violet hue over everything below. The air felt heavy, as if the very planet itself was holding its breath. Westbrook's team moved quietly, their eyes scanning the horizon, searching for signs of life or, perhaps, remnants of something far older. Then, in the distance, a shadow emerged, something out of place amidst the barren landscape. As they approached, the shapes became clearer: tall, crumbling structures jutting from the earth, their outlines faint but unmistakable. They were ruins, but unlike anything the team had ever seen. The architecture was unlike the rigid, geometric designs of the Galactic Union species. These structures were curving, fluid, as though they were built with the intention of flowing with the land rather than dominating it. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Erica Patel whispered, awe and disbelief in her voice. She stepped forward, brushing her gloved hand over the crumbled stone, her fingers tracing faint symbols etched into the walls. "I don't know," Westbrook replied, his voice low and steady. "But I think we've found something that could change everything." As they moved deeper into the ruins, they uncovered what appeared to be a vault, its entrance partially buried under centuries of dust and debris. They worked quickly, clearing the rubble with practiced precision, and within moments, the vault door creaked open. Inside, the air smelled stale, heavy with the passage of time. But amid the darkness, there was something else, something that pulsed with a strange, forgotten energy. At the center of the room, a small, metallic device lay on a pedestal, its surface etched with patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer. The device was clearly ancient, older than any known technology, but it hummed with an undeniable presence, as if it was waiting for something, or someone, to awaken it. "What is this?" Dr. William Oakes asked, his voice filled with wonder as he approached the device. He gently ran his fingers over its surface, and as he did, the device flickered to life, the once dull symbols now glowing faintly in the dim light of the chamber. Westbrook's heart skipped a beat. "It's a data storage unit," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's like nothing we've ever seen." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just any technology, it was the legacy of a species that had been lost to time, wiped out by forces they couldn't even begin to understand. The team worked together, carefully extracting the device and hooking it up to their portable systems. They couldn't afford to take any chances. This discovery could change the course of humanity's future, and they needed to be sure of every detail. As the data began to transfer, Dr. Oakes's eyes widened. He adjusted the settings, piecing together fragments of the ancient records. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. The records revealed the existence of a precursor civilization, one that had been as advanced as humanity, if not more so. Their technology was unlike anything in a known galaxy. Faster than light travel, yes, but it wasn't the same method used by the Galactic Union. This technology, the shadow drive, was a different kind of propulsion. A method that bypassed the Council's hyperspace lanes entirely. It was the key to traveling through dead space, to regions the Council thought were unreachable. It was the key to freedom. "This is it," Westbrook muttered, his hands trembling slightly as he read through the data. "This is how we can escape. This is how we can fight back." The shadow drive was more than just a new way to travel. It was a weapon, a tool that could allow humanity to slip through the cracks of the Council's surveillance system. For the first time, they could move freely without detection, without the Council's reach. It was everything humanity needed to break free from their isolation. "They were like us, innovative, adaptive," Westbrook said, his voice filled with awe. "The Council destroyed them because they feared them." The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a warning. The precursors, like humanity, had been too advanced, too adaptable. The Galactic Union's founding species, the very ones who had isolated humanity, had wiped out the precursor civilization because they had feared their potential. The Council had recognized their power, their ability to adapt and evolve quickly, and it had destroyed them for it. Westbrook's mind raced with the implications. The shadow drive was the key, the answer to breaking the Council's chokehold on humanity. The path to freedom, to true independence, had been laid out before them. But it also meant something else. Humanity was not alone. There were others out there, civilizations that had risen and fallen, each one leaving behind the potential for something greater. "We need to get this back to Earth," Westbrook said, determination building in his chest. This could change everything. The Council won't see us coming. As the device transferred its data to their systems, the team worked quickly to secure it. The path ahead was now clear. Humanity had always been resourceful, always finding a way to survive against impossible odds. But now, with the shadow drive in their hands, they would finally have the means to take their place among the stars, not as the Council's prisoners, but as equals, ready to forge their own future. The ruins of the precursor civilization had given them the gift of a new beginning. Now, it was time to awaken what had been left behind and use it to carve their own path through the galaxy. The galaxy had held its breath for years, unsure of what would come next. The Galactic Union, once confident in their decision to quarantine humanity, now felt the weight of their mistake pressing down upon them. Humanity had risen from the ashes of rejection, quietly expanding its reach in the dark corners of the galaxy, building an empire in the shadows where no one could see. Now, the Council was waking up to the truth. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, its ingenuity, and its ability to adapt. And they had made a fatal mistake. Admiral Gregory Hayes stood on the command deck of the Terran Defense Force flagship, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The tension in the air was palpable. The battle ahead would determine the fate of Earth and everything humanity had built. For years, they had remained hidden, their colonies secret, their technology advanced and unseen. But now, the time had come to fight for their future. The Galactic Union had sent its fleet to wipe them out, to crush their rebellion once and for all. But Admiral Hayes knew that humanity was ready. "The time has come," he said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable certainty. "We'll protect Earth at all costs." His officers stood at attention, their faces a mixture of determination and nervous anticipation. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the day when the Council would come to finish what they had started. But now that it was here, there was no fear. There was only resolve. Humanity had been pushed too far, and now they would fight back with everything they had. "We've been planning for years," Admiral Hayes continued, his eyes narrowing as the tactical map filled with the approaching Galactic Union ships. "They think they know our tactics, but they've never faced anything like this before. Humanity doesn't fight the way they expect. We don't follow the rules." The Council fleet, once a symbol of unmatched power, now appeared vulnerable. The Shadow Drive, a technology humanity had unearthed from the precursors, had leveled the playing field. The Shadow Drive allowed human ships to travel through space without detection, bypassing the Council's surveillance systems completely. Humanity could strike first, and they could strike hard, before the Council even realized what was happening. As the human fleet, led by Admiral Hayes, moved into position, the tension crackled through the bridge. The officers glanced at each other, silently preparing for the battle that was about to unfold. They were no longer the underdogs, no longer the outsiders. The humans had fought to get to this moment, and now they were ready to show the galaxy what they could do. Then, without warning, the fleet moved into position. Shadow Drive-powered ships flickered in and out of existence, appearing directly within the heart of the Galactic Union fleet. The Council had no time to react. Their ships, with all their advanced technology and firepower, were rendered helpless. They had no way to track the human ships, and their weapon systems failed to engage. The Council's ships were overwhelmed by precision strikes, human vessels materializing right beside their targets and cutting through their defenses with deadly accuracy. Grand Marshal Kalen Zirek, the Chrysal leader, watched in horror from the command deck of his flagship as his fleet was decimated. The crystalline being's body shimmered with the glow of its panic. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was not the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen, Grand Marshal Zirek muttered to himself, his voice shaking with disbelief. We underestimated them. The Chrysal, once so confident in their control over the galaxy, now found themselves on the defensive. Their once imposing fleet was crumbling before their eyes. The Terran Defense Force was not fighting with brute force, they were fighting with a kind of precision and stealth that made them almost impossible to counter. The Shadow Drive had given humanity an advantage they had never imagined, and now the Council's arrogance was their downfall. Human ships, sleek and fast, cut through the Council's ranks like a blade through paper. The Chrysal ships, once proud and untouchable, now felt the sting of their own ignorance. They had thought that isolating humanity would break them, but instead, it had made them stronger. It had made them resourceful. They had learned, adapted, and fought back with everything they had. The battle raged on, the Council fleet disintegrating under the onslaught of the human ships. Explosions filled the space around them, debris scattering in every direction. The Chrysal and Varith ships attempted to regroup, but it was too late. Humanity had already proven its superiority. It wasn't just about power, it was about the ability to adapt and think beyond the rules. And that was something the Galactic Union had never accounted for. On the Titan, Admiral Hayes watched the scene unfold, his face grim but resolute. The fight wasn't over, but the Council had already lost. They had sent their fleet, thinking it would crush humanity's rebellion, but instead, they had ignited a fire that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity was not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy, and they were proving that they would not be silenced. In the heart of the battle, the Galactic Union fleet faltered. Their flagship, once the symbol of the Council's might, was crippled, and Grand Marshal Zirek realized the truth too late. Humanity had never been the threat they imagined. The real threat was their own fear of the unknown, fear of the unexpected, fear of what humanity could become. This wasn't supposed to happen, Zirek repeated, his voice barely audible, swallowed by the chaos around him. The Shadow Drive had turned the tide. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were no longer isolated. They had fought back in the most unexpected way through innovation, through resilience, through their ability to adapt. The Galactic Union had made a fatal mistake, and now they would have to live with the consequences. The final shots rang out through the cold silence of space, the Council's fleet breaking apart. Humanity had not just survived, they had emerged victorious. And with that victory, they would reshape the galaxy. The battle for the future had just begun. The air in the Council chamber was thick with tension as the Galactic Confederation gathered for what would become a historic moment. The chamber, once the seat of absolute power, now held something far more profound change. The Grand Hall, where countless species had convened to decide the fate of the galaxy, was now filled with representatives from every corner of the universe. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was a sense of anticipation, a silent acknowledgement that things would never be the same again. Ambassador Eliza Shaw, standing at the front, could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. This was the culmination of everything humanity had fought for, an unprecedented victory against the Galactic Union's oppression. For decades, humans had been considered outcasts, rejected, quarantined, and feared. Now, they were standing at the heart of the galaxy, not as subordinates, but as equals. The very room that had once rejected them was now the stage for their ascension. Her voice broke the stillness of the chamber, steady and filled with quiet power. "We didn't come here asking for permission," she said, her gaze sweeping across the assembly of alien representatives. "We came here to show you that we are equals, not your subordinates." The words echoed in the vast chamber, hanging in the air like a challenge, a statement of undeniable truth. The representatives, who once looked down on humanity, now regarded them with a mixture of respect and apprehension. Ambassador Shaw stood before them, the living embodiment of humanity's strength, resilience, and defiance. She was not just speaking for herself, she was speaking for every human who had ever dreamed of reaching the stars, for every soul that had been stifled by the Council's oppressive rule. Around her, the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species shifted uncomfortably. Their once secure positions now seemed fragile, their fear of humanity's potential palpable. Humanity had shown them something they hadn't expected: an unyielding spirit, a relentless drive to adapt and overcome. And now, instead of cowering in fear, humanity had risen. They had taken the very forces that had sought to destroy them and turned them into their greatest strengths. Humanity hadn't built an empire through brute force, like the Council had expected. No, they had built it through unity, through cooperation, through the ability to adapt when faced with impossible odds. While the galaxy's oldest civilizations had followed their rigid patterns, humans had learned to think outside the box, to create, to innovate in ways that no one had anticipated. They had faced the greatest challenges in the galaxy and emerged stronger, more united, more capable than anyone had imagined. As Ambassador Shaw stood tall before the assembly, her eyes locked on the representatives, she could feel the weight of humanity's victory. The Council had sought to isolate them, to stifle their potential. But in the end, humanity had proven that they would not be held back, that they would find a way to rise, no matter the obstacles. And rise they did. The Galactic Confederation, which had once been a symbol of exclusive power, now found itself under the weight of a new, undeniable truth: humanity was no longer an outcast. They had earned their place at the table, and the galaxy had no choice but to recognize it. In the end, humanity didn't just survive. They thrived. And as the galaxy watches, it learns that the greatest power in the universe is not force, but the ability to adapt and change. The Council, once made up of the most powerful species in the galaxy, now stood in quiet awe as Ambassador Shaw made her final declaration. The members of the Galactic Confederation, once divided by fear and arrogance, now found themselves united by a common understanding: humanity had changed the rules. They had proven that survival was not just about dominance, but about growth, about finding new ways to exist, to adapt, and to thrive in a universe that had once seemed so vast, so impenetrable. As the assembly began to nod in agreement, slowly, cautiously, the Galactic Confederation was reborn not under the thumb of the most powerful species, but as a new union, one built on cooperation, equality, and mutual respect. The cry of fear that once echoed through the galaxy was now replaced by the sound of unity, as the diverse species looked to one another, knowing that this new chapter in their history was not one defined by division, but by a shared future. The doors to the chamber slowly began to open, and the light from the vast cosmos outside streamed in, illuminating the faces of the new Galactic Confederation. They had been given a second chance, a new beginning, one that would be forged not through domination, but through the very strength that humanity had always embodied, the strength to adapt and overcome. Humanity had taken the first step, and now, they would lead the galaxy into a new era of peace and cooperation. And as the members of the Galactic Confederation stood together, they knew that the future they were building would be stronger, more diverse, and more united than anything they had ever dreamed of. The galaxy, once fearful of humanity's potential, now stands united in a new era of cooperation and peace. The age of isolation was over. And in its place, the galaxy would witness a new dawn, a dawn where humanity would no longer be an outcast, but a leader among the stars. As the final words echoed in the chamber, humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. They had fought for it, they had earned it, and now the universe would see just how powerful humanity could become when given the freedom to shape its own destiny. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, their cold light casting a soft glow over the infinite dark. Earth, once isolated, now stood at the center of a vast and interconnected galaxy. The blue planet, once confined to its own corner of the universe, now pulsed with life, a beacon of human ingenuity and defiance. Its surface shimmered with the evidence of humanity's survival. Cities sprawled across continents, new colonies thriving on distant moons, and a network of connections binding them all together. Humanity had not just survived the Galactic Union's rejection. They had thrived. They had turned their isolation into strength, their adaptability into power. The once barren corners of space, dismissed by the Council as useless, were now filled with thriving human colonies, each one a testament to the spirit of progress and innovation. The galaxy, once a place of fear and exclusion, had become their home, and humanity was no longer a footnote in the history of the stars. They were becoming the architects of a new future. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, as if the entire galaxy held its breath, watching humanity rise. From the darkest depths of forgotten space, humanity had emerged, not with weapons or conquest, but with unity, creativity, and the courage to face the unknown. They had carved out a place for themselves, not by force, but by the sheer will to survive and flourish. The final message of humanity's journey appeared, etched in the emptiness of space, leaving behind a sense of quiet triumph that echoed across the galaxy. The words were simple, but their weight was undeniable. They cast us out, but in doing so, they gave us everything we needed to build an empire no one saw coming. In that moment, humanity understood. The Council's attempts to silence them, to isolate them, had been their greatest mistake. What the Council had not realized was that humanity thrived in adversity, that their greatest strength was not their ability to dominate, but their resilience, their capacity to adapt and transform the impossible into opportunity. As the final echoes of the words faded, Earth stood proudly at the center of a galaxy that had once feared it. No longer confined to its home system, humanity had claimed its place among the stars. And the galaxy, now forever changed, would never again underestimate the power of the human spirit. In the episodes ahead, we'll delve deep into the mysterious and fascinating world of humanity's fight for its place in the stars. Prepare to witness a new age of galactic cooperation and the power of humanity to challenge the impossible. You won't want to miss what happens next, because in the universe, humanity is just getting started. Stay tuned, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of humanity's unexpected rise? Could we really change the course of the galaxy? Let's discuss.